When a loved one enters hospice, emotions are high. Old patterns can resurface, and everyone may have a different idea of what is best. If you've been there, you know. These dynamics can add stress to an already difficult time, but they can also be an opportunity for connection and healing when handled with care. Today, you'll hear me talking with Geisinger Hospice social worker John Myers. He's walked alongside countless families through this exact situation. Together, you'll hear us talk about why family dynamics often feel so challenging during hospice, what to do when these relationships feel so hard, and how simple tools like honest communication and active listening can change the entire experience. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by family dynamics while caring for a loved one, or if you know someone who has, or if you just want to be more prepared, this episode will give you both practical insights and the reassurance that you're not alone. Welcome to Hospice Redefined. This is the podcast where we uncover the true purpose of hospice care and empower caregivers, families, and healthcare professionals with practical tools, compassionate support, and valuable insights. Let's face it, hospice is often misunderstood. It's viewed as an ending or a sign of giving up. But in reality, hospice is about life, living with dignity, comfort, and meaningful connection during one of life's most profound transitions. I'm your host, Rachel Carta, a registered nurse with experience in hospice care, alongside of an incredible team of hospice professionals. We're here to shift the narrative and provide support to the caregivers who are really in the trenches. Whether you're one of those caregivers, a healthcare professional, or someone curious, or even if you're uncertain about hospice, this is the podcast for you. Let's redefine hospice care together, one conversation at a time. Welcome to another episode of Hospice Redefined. I'm your host, Rachel Carta, a registered hospice nurse, functional nutrition counselor, and life coach. And I'm here today with the Geisinger Hospice social worker. He's back again, John Myers. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to navigate family dynamics during hospice care. And you can imagine that this could be a 7-hour long episode. It won't be that, we promise. But there's a lot of things that come into play when someone is approaching end of life. And one thing that I wanted to point out before we even get started is this concept of we all come to the table with our life view, with our worldview. We all have experiences. We've all had different things happen in our life. We all have different beliefs, different values. And just because you're from the same family or you were born in the same town doesn't mean you share those things. And what happens is when we get to a situation where a loved one is at end of life, there's many people sometimes in a family coming to the table to try their best to help out this loved one. And there can be a lot of difficulty in this time because of what I said earlier. Everyone coming in with different ideas, different worldview, different values, and also a different understanding of what's going on for the person. So John is here to speak to us about that because in his role, he gets to take that on the most of anyone on the hospice team as the social worker. It's often his phone that rings with a family member in distress. And it's often the nurse who's calling him to find out what should I do about this family member having a hard time with this patient. So welcome to the show, John. I'm excited to talk to you about this. It's a really important topic.
Well, thanks for having me, Rachel. When you say 7 hours, I think that's an underestimate. We could be talking about this literally for twice that long because this is everything to me. This is the first thing I ask when I go into a home, or the first thing I want to know when I go into a home is how many family are involved, because that factors, because it's almost like a catch-22. You want a lot of family involved to be together to take care of the patient, help assist with the patient. No one can do it on their own. However, when there's a lot of family involved, there's often a lot of family dynamics. And I always would argue, all families have issues. That's just, if ever there's a time and someone says, oh no, everything's perfect and wonderful. Well, come on. We all get that. We all have our own dynamics. I like to use the example of my son great guy, great young man. He's got a lot going for him. He has had issues with anxiety all of his life. And I've always say to people, I feel like I can talk to anybody about anything, about anxiety or anything, except for one person in my life, and that would be my son. And that's just because it's family. Families are difficult. So family dynamics are a huge part of all of this. And we're going to get into some of the different factors that I feel are most relevant.
Thank you for sharing that, John. And I think that you're right about how when it's your own family, it's a whole different thing. I went through the death of my father with a large family and lots of different ideas involved, and very much can understand what people go through when there's a lot of hands in the pot, if you will. And again, I want to just say again, coming at it with different experience, different worldview, different values. So, John, tell us, there's also this idea that when someone is in need of care, so when the patient is in need of care, there's usually a caregiver, and usually, logistically, we identify who is the primary caregiver. And that might be a spouse, it could be a daughter, a son, or it could be an agency, it could be a nursing home or someone else. And I think that when it is the spouse, particularly, it can really disrupt the usual dynamics of that partnership. Can you spend a little time talking about that,
Oh
please?
yeah, that's definitely a very real situation that happens for people is the relationship with between a spouse and a patient. Uh, You can think of this scenario. I see this a lot. We have our patients, or let's say they're in their 70s or 80s or whatever, and they've been married for 50, 60, sometimes pushing 70 years. So they're very close. But in many situations, also, they spent their entire life where they worked, they had busy lives, they spent much of their time not together 24/7. And then you get into this situation and they are together 24/7, and it can cause strain on their relationship, just that alone. And then when you add that someone's sick, need of care, struggling with all the emotions that go along with that, it can create some interesting dynamics between the spouse and the patient.
Yeah, and I imagine too that the roles sometimes are reversed. And sometimes the person who was more of the provider doing, more of those type of things now, they're the one that needs to care. And I think if I'm correct in this, that there can be some anger from the patient at having to take that care, having to need that. Some resentment is going back and forth between both parties. And I imagine that this can really make something that could be such a sacred time really difficult on an emotional level, a physical level, a spiritual level, all the levels.
It can be, yeah, it can be very, very impactful. Often I've had many patients will talk about they feel like a burden on their family. That's always a big issue that they say. They feel like a burden on their spouse.
Mm.
They feel like they useless because they can't do as much as they used to do. And so they don't like the strain that it puts on their spouse, being so dependent on their spouse. And then conversely, the spouse who often is very good intention and is trying to, be compassionate about how his or her spouse feels when it comes to that sort of issue. They're also getting frustrated and getting tired because they are having to do everything. And then they have feelings of guilt because they are getting frustrated, and they like shouldn't feel like they should never get frustrated. And it just leads to all kinds of complex emotions. It's a very difficult dynamic.
And so for you as a social worker coming into the home and seeing this kind of dynamic and seeing the toll it's taking on the relationship, on the patient and their spouse, what do you do?
So the first thing I do is listen. That's the biggest thing they want. People just want to talk about their stuff. I try to I try to be understanding that they are having complex emotions, and I try not to ever suggest or give advice on that type of stuff. A lot of times it's just listen to what they're going through and to let them know that they're not unique. That's kind of the point of this podcast, right? It's to let everybody know that these feelings that you have, all these different negative feelings that you're having, are very normal, and you're not alone. And I think it's important just to listen and let people vent about that and let them know that you're not alone. Totally understand. It doesn't make you, oh my gosh, I don't have that kind of reaction. Like, how dare you? No, we get it. Of course you're feeling this way. And I think that's very important for them to understand that.
Absolutely. And this whole idea of listening is a little foreign to a lot of people because I think there's a problem solving part of all of us that when we hear a problem, we want to fix it and we want to give advice. And there's oftentimes no answer, especially when it comes to this stage of life. There's no answer, there's no making it better.
On that point, Rachel, I just want to jump in and say this on that. I think that happens a lot of times with families, makes things complicated with families, is that children then, or the spouse or grandchildren even, they want to solve things. Everybody wants to solve things. They want to impart their wisdom. They want to give their advice. And a lot of times it may be because they feel like they're not doing a whole lot else otherwise. Like, for example, let me give you this example. We have many situations, we live in a big country here. People, my own son lives 3 hours away now. Kids grow up, they spread out across the country, and then when their parents or grandparents are going through this, they can't make it back here often, and which adds to their own dynamics of feelings of guilt and things like that. But my point is, they'll come back here, and because they're not so involved, I feel sometimes they are looking to impart their wisdom and advice a lot of times. And that's often not what their other family members need or want at that point. They just want to be able to voice their feelings and opinions. And they just want people to listen. And the people who struggle the most with listening a lot of times is family.
Yeah, that's so absolutely true. And again, I think it goes back to this really well-intentioned part that you want to fix what's broken. And even when the family member that you're trying to quote unquote fix is, at the end of their life and they've gone through so much. And this whole idea of trying to fix it is just this part of you that wants to make it better and doesn't want to lose that person. And I think this also ties in grief because a lot of this wanting to fix something that's not possible to fix is also a part of grief. And when we take time to listen, and this is something you can take listeners into every part of your life because allowing someone to just share the way they're feeling, letting them know they're not alone, like John said, letting them know that what they're feeling is not unique and that it's okay, whatever they feel, the guilt, the resentment, the anger, the happy, the sad, all the things that go into this, that it's okay to feel whatever's coming up. This alone can give peace and allow for a more calm process.
It's one of the reasons why I love the support group we have, the caregiver support group, because so many times people come to that group, they think they're alone. They think the thoughts they have are unique. And then they find out that other people going through similar experiences to them are feeling the same things. And I think it's so important to realize that. I can tell you my own family situation is similar in a way that people adopt different roles. And what people have to understand about this is your relationship with the patient is unique. It's your own relationship. We talk about this with grief, that everyone experiences grief differently. That's because everyone's relationship with the person was different. And it's the same thing when it comes to when they're still alive and you're in the different roles of caregiving and things like that. Your relationship was always unique and different. So therefore the feelings you're having are also going to be a bit unique and different as well.
That's a really great point and not something I had thought about before even this moment. To know that your relationship with your loved one is going to dictate your grief process and it makes a lot of sense as I think about my own grief process, different things, just even a year and a few months later, having a total crying fit just a few days ago, because of my relationship that I had with my dad and memories and different parts of that. And I think that just listeners to be able to hear that, to know that, and I guess this goes true to complicated relationships
I'm,
too. Say something about that,
I was
please.
just going to jump in and talk about that. I try to get a sense, and obviously I can't figure everything out about a family when I go in for like 1 hour at a time, but as I try to build a rapport with families, I try to get a sense of their relationships with their loved ones and with the patient themselves. Sometimes they weren't always that great, right? I mean, that happens too. That doesn't mean you don't love the patient, but that can make things a little complicated at times. Again, I don't like, I probably shouldn't share all stories about my own life, but I can tell you that when my dad was dying, we had complicated relationships with my dad, whereas my oldest brother, he was very close to my dad because he remembers dad when from long ago when my dad was healthy and did all these things. Well, some of the dynamics that I, for example, have with my dad were a little different, and it affected the way we related, I feel, as my dad was dying. So there's so many different dynamics, and a lot of times the complex relationships. Just think of this, Rachel, the spouse relationship. Let's face it, not everybody has wonderful, happy marriages for 60 plus years. It's very rare, right? And there are many times when people are just together just because they are, it's what they do, but they actually don't get along that well. Well, when someone is sick and dying, that can create some complications. The relationship they've had all along certainly can impact how they feel about caring for the patient too. So many dynamics, Rachel. Again, this could be 15 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, a lot of you listening, you're thinking as you're hearing this about some complicated dynamics in your own family, or maybe you have a friend who shared this about their own family. Like, this is not a simple thing. It's beautiful to have a family, to have people to love, but it also comes with a lot of extra stuff. Um, One thing I know I've heard you say, and you kind of said it already today, but I'd love to hear more about what you mean by effective and honest communication, because it seems like in order to have the challenge of an end of life situation where you've accepted hospice care, so you have a team of people helping you. You've got nurses, you've got home health aides, you've got the social worker, the chaplain, if you've chosen all those services. You've got people in the home and you've got support around you. And now the goal is to have your loved one be in comfort, to not have pain, to not have troubling symptoms, to be at peace. So when you say, John, that effective and honest communication is crucial, can you say more about that, please?
I will. It goes with the patient speaking to us, and it goes with family members interacting with each other or with the patient. It's hard. It's hard to be completely honest with each other sometimes, right? We worry about the reaction we're going to get. So sometimes we say things, we're guarded with what we say, how we express ourselves. This is the time of life more than ever where it's so important to try to get past some of those hurdles that you feel. This is the time to take that leap of faith, to be trusting and say what's on your mind and get your honest feelings out there. And I find most situations that's going to work out for the best. Because if you continue to kind of sugarcoat things, like a good example is we always talk about, I feel like you nurses have a very hard job, Rachel, because you need to be honest with the family yourself. You need to let them know when a patient's, really starting to decline and not do so well. That's a hard thing to do. The easy thing to do would be, oh yeah, he seems to be doing okay right now. We'll come back and reassess in a couple of days. Well, that might make the family feel good in that moment. That's not what they really needed to hear, right? They needed to know the truth. And the truth is always crucial at this time of life, especially, I feel, and being honest about your feelings and having that line of communication be open like that. It's critical at this time.
I think you're so right. And to point out the honesty in the family, I mean, you're right. Having these difficult conversations, let's just say there was nothing that prepared me to learn how to do that. Nursing school did not have a class. Well, maybe there was a little couple words about it, but to really be able to talk to a family about what's really happening, I have found that by being honest in that way, in a gentle, kind, telling them, yes, the disease is progressing, things are changing, people have a much better reaction to that when they know, because they already
Right.
know that they're declining. They already know that things are getting worse. And to have you say that as the medical professional is very important. And I think there's also something to be said of sometimes patients don't want to share with the nurse how much pain they're really in. So that can be a really hard thing. We have ways of knowing that you're in pain. I can sense it in my body. I can see it on your face. And having that honesty back and forth with the patient and the family and the medical team, it's really important because then we can treat the problem. We can make sure that there is comfort, make sure that there's not untreated pain, which just makes this entire process so much worse for everyone involved, including the caregiver.
Yeah, Rachel, you bring up a good point. It's kind of moving into another area of that will be discussed at some point on the podcast, but I always how honest and forthcoming the patient is about how they're feeling. I think a lot of times, though, tying that back into our topic here today, I think that stems from their relationship with their family too. They're trying to hide from them. They're trying a lot of times to protect them, um, be guarded about how they're feeling. They don't want to be honest and forthcoming. And so therefore, then they also will present that to us as well. And it's hard to help them in those situations, so that's just another reason why, like every aspect of our lives, right? You got to have honest communication is always the better approach.
Yeah, and I think one of the larger, if we want to really zoom out and we think about what end of life means in this Western culture, it's really like a taboo subject that people don't want to talk about. They're afraid to talk about it. And, by us creating this podcast and by having episodes about this, one of my goals is to really bring awareness in the fact that death is inevitable for all of us. And I know that might sound morbid or sad, or I mean, it's just inevitable. And I think that the taboo around it is why sometimes family members do hide their symptoms because they don't want to scare their loved ones, or they don't want their loved ones to know that it's coming near. I've had many talks with my patients where I have looked them right in the eye and I have said, you know what's happening in your body, and they do. And they know when end of life is approaching. And I think I hate to use this word, but like normalizing that end of life is a part of life. It's a part of this human journey that we find ourselves on.
You made me think of something else. Again, this could be 15 hours, but you made me think of something else when it comes to the family dynamics is about that topic of how we view death and dying, and the family members often struggle with seeing, say, their mom or their dad or whoever in this situation because they were always the strong. They had this. Well, frankly, Rachel, you talked about this, I believe, in the past about how you viewed your dad was the strong, his personality was everybody, he lit up a room, right? And then to see him completely different,
Mhm.
that's an adjustment. And I think a lot of family members struggle with that. But again, I just don't. The one thing I say this all the time, I say this to people all the time about how I don't know a lot about things, but the one thing I know for sure is you can't not talk about stuff. You can't try to keep things to yourself. That never works. That I know. And this is a perfect example of that. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to see your dad struggling like this. You have this images of him being this big, strong guy and everything, and it's hard to deal with. But you can't keep it in. You gotta talk about it. You gotta get it out. And either that's with us, the nurse, or social worker, or other family members. You can't do this stuff alone. Bottom line.
It's true. And you do definitely bring up this concept of when we see our parents aging, it is very challenging. Oftentimes, especially when dementia is involved, and we can do a whole nother episode just on that alone, watching your loved one lose who they are. I can barely get the sentence out, is like rips out your heart, rips out your heart, puts it on the ground, stomps it, drive over it a couple times with a giant truck because you know that person as a certain they were not perfect. They had a lot of issues just like we all do, but to watch their mind degrade is really, really hard. And I think that every person in the family will handle that differently. Some people will accept it, some people will reject it and say, how can this be happening? I found that in my own situation, that there was a lot of denial going on about what was happening, and that made things much harder. And like John said many times in this episode, that being able to talk about the way you feel is really important.
Kind of along the lines you're talking, Rachel, I can tell you, like, I can think of a situation where, let's say there's an oldest son is not very involved in the care of his father. He's having a hard time with it. Younger son is wondering what that's about. He is involved with his care, so he can't understand why his older brother is acting the way he is. Later on, much later on, like years down the road, perhaps, after many bitter feelings, he may have found out from his older brother that the reason he just couldn't see his dad like that. He always had these images of his dad being strong and everything, and he just never could deal with it. Well, rather than process that, talk about that as it was going on, never did. It festered as guilt for him for years and years. Some hostility between the older brother and younger brother festered for years and years because they never talked about it. Lack of communication never works. Now they reached the point where they actually did talk about it and they're close again. Imagine that. That's how it needs you, people need to talk about it. They need to understand that the feelings they're having are not unusual and it needs to be expressed.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that not everyone can handle some parts of this stage. Not everyone can handle seeing what it looks like at end of life. Not everyone can handle the actual caregiving tasks. And the person who's doing the caregiving can feel very resentful of the family members that are not there to help. Some of them aren't there for reasons that, we're not here to judge what those reasons are, but some literally emotionally cannot handle what is in front of them. And so I would love, if it's okay with you, John, for us to just give some,
Yeah.
let's give some tips to help people who are in this situation. And I love that you've often said, and I've heard you say this, that some people get trapped in this idea that I shouldn't have to ask. My siblings or my family, they should ask me what I need. They should say, "Hey, can you come sit with mom so that I can go run out to the store?" And because they don't say that to you, the resentment inside is building and building. So I think it's common for us to want our loved ones to be able to read our minds, right?
Absolutely. Yes, you hit it right on the head. That's not going to happen. You gotta be the bigger guy in that situation or whatever. If you need to just swallow your pride sometimes and say, "Hey, I need help here. I need you to help me with this. I need you to do that for me if you could, please." Don't just assume that someone is going to step up and help you, even if you think that they should do that. You're probably right. They probably should. They're not going to. That's just the way it goes sometimes.
I think sometimes people don't think about it. They
100%.
don't think, hey, they just see you as, if you're the caregiver and you're doing everything, they see you as capable and handling it. They don't see that you've got cracks and you need help.
Right.
And so they don't think about asking. I think that could be a huge
Absolutely
part.
could be. Frankly, people can be a bit oblivious at times. Like, sometimes they're naive. They think you're doing well. And because you put up this facade showing that you are doing well, people actually believe that. They can't read your mind sometimes. And a lot of it has to do with proximity too. Like if the person who lives closest, well, like to say there's a group of family members, the one that lives closest a lot of times ends up doing this and that for the patient, whereas the one who might live a little further away feels like they're stepping on toes. They might feel like they're overstepping their bounds if they ask help. You don't know for sure. You can't just assume that they are having these feelings. Oh, the heck with it. I don't have to do anything. My brother does it all. You need to be the bigger man in that situation or the bigger woman in that situation and ask for help.
Sounds like you're going back to this idea of communication again,
It's
being
all
able
about
to
communication.
being able to communicate your needs and what you can do. And if someone who's caring, if spending time with the patient is too hard for them for one reason or another, maybe they can help you with paperwork. Maybe they can run out to the store and grab some groceries. Maybe they can work on some of the, run to the bank, do all these little things that are so difficult when you're caregiving for someone, being able to actually get out of the house, go to the bank, go to the grocery store, take a breath outside. All these things can be impossible when you're in there, and being able to ask for that is huge.
Some of the best situations I've witnessed is when I hear about a family getting together and actually have a family meeting where they sit down and They don't argue, but they assign different roles.
Mm.
They look at calendars, they figure out, well, who can do this that day, and they get it resolved as a group. They're not bickering over things. They're not hoping someone will offer to go for groceries. They're assigning that task to the person so everyone's aware. That's just sometimes what you have to do. You have to turn it into like a board meeting.
That sounds like such a fantastic idea, and I feel like it should be part of any family crisis, not just end of life. Because I think when people have a clear direction of what they need to do, it really helps them feel more like they're helping. Because sometimes this is such a helpless situation in so many ways. There's so many things that we don't have control over, and there's so many emotions that are wrapped up where if you know that someone's making dinner on Monday, someone's going to the grocery store on Tuesday, someone's filing mom and dad's paperwork on Wednesday, you know that all these things are getting done. And I think another piece of the puzzle here is that when this communication is not happening, it's easy to make people feel guilty or to kind of say these passive aggressive type of things that you're not really helping. And
Yes,
I think that can make, you always say, John, that guilt makes people uncomfortable and defensive.
correct. It only makes things worse. When passive aggressiveness comes out, that never makes things better. So I always suggest to people to write things down. I'm a big on that, making lists, things like that. Like I say, write down all the different tasks, all the different things that you're doing and could use some help with, and spell it out for people. And then you have a get together and go, all right, this is some of the things I need help with. What can you do? And you're not pointing a finger when you come off like that. You're not saying, why don't you help me? You don't do anything. Just say, hey, which of these would you like me to help me with? And kind of
That's
assign tasks like that. I think it's a good way to go about it.
that's such a great idea. I feel like that's something that we should implement somehow and with the way we teach in our hospice admissions, even.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
going to admit a patient after this right now, and it just seems like that is such a great idea to be able to everybody come to the table. You think about this concept in all parts of life. Like if everyone's on the same page, things runs more smoothly, right? Think about like at a job when no one's communicating and everyone's doing their own thing and nobody knows what the right hand or the left hand is doing. It sounds like being on the same page, having that effective, honest communication is a way that the family dynamics that exist, we can't fix them all during this process. And that's not really even the point of this process right now. That there can be resolution to all that, but to be able to communicate your feelings, be honest on all sides, the patient, the family, the healthcare, to the healthcare practitioners and anybody involved, knowing how hard that is, can make the transition to end of life so much more smooth, so much more peaceful, which is the ultimate goal. You have anything else, John?
see, one other thing I just want to point out to people, and I understand this is so hard. However, family dynamics. Let's say you're having a hard time with some of your family members. I want you to remember and think about that it does work two ways. You, how you act, how you react to each other plays a role in it. If you're going to come off a little strong, a little passive aggressive, then guess how your family members are going to respond? I mean, each person plays a role in a relationship. I know that. I can say this. I can be honest about this. If I want to stir something up with someone in my family, I just got to break out the sarcasm. I know I'm going to get them worked up, right? But if I want to, I know how to get under somebody's skin. But if I want to try to have a good conversation with them, I also know how to act. I know how to do that. And we all can do that. We all play a role in how it does go. I know some dynamics are impossible. I get that, but we all play a role in smoothing them over, make it better. So I just encourage people to gather your thoughts, write down what you want to talk about, write down the things you want help with, all that stuff, get prepared in advance, and your family get-togethers, meetings will go a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. And also to add here, reach out for help. You have a hospice team that's here to help you with some of this. And if you need guidance, if sometimes it's easier to have a third party talk to a family member that's, a little removed from the situation, we do that kind of stuff. And we're happy to try to help you navigate whatever you're going through.
I go back to the comment I think I made right at the beginning of all this when I said how I feel like I can talk to anybody about any issue. The one person I have a hard time talking about with any issue is my son. sometimes it's hard, but sometimes you need an outside source. So that's what you do. You need to use people. Talk to us. We can help you with the situations that you're in.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for joining us in another episode. And we are always looking forward to hearing from you. I'd love to have you go over to hospiceredefined.com. There's a caregiver self-care checklist that you can download there. It's very easy. Just input your information and you'll get instant access to that checklist. It's just 5 things that you can add into your day that it's just 5 ideas that you can potentially maybe pick one each day to focus on little easy stuff that will just help you to stay strong in this journey, that will help you to keep yourself healthy through this journey. And also, you can reach out to us with any questions. I'm sure when it comes to the word hospice, you have a lot of questions, you have a lot of fears, you have a lot of concerns. Reach out to us and let us know what those are. We can answer them here on this podcast. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hospice Redefined. We see you, we hear you, and we're so glad that you're a part of this community. Please visit hospiceredefined.com to find our free caregiving guide and to keep updated on all of the latest podcast episodes. If you know someone who's interested in hospice, or maybe they're curious, or maybe there's someone who needs it for their family, please share this episode with them. Thank you for being here, and we'll see you on the next episode.